Hello, I'm Howard Hedegaard with the Injury Prevention Center at Dartmouth College. I'm involved in highway safety projects throughout the state of New Hampshire that are handled by the Injury Prevention Center and are paid for, funded, and supported by the New Hampshire Highway Safety Agency. And I'm here today with my friend and peer, Steve Grattan from the Lovering Family Foundation.
Hello, Howard. I am Steve Grattan from the Lovering Family Foundation. I work with Howard to talk to high schools, and we're both involved in highway safety. So I'll let Howard tell you more about a program called Room to Live that we're doing.
Yeah. There are actually a number of programs that Steve and I are involved in, and we work together very closely because we're both very passionate about highway safety, and we have a particular passion for keeping the younger drivers, the teen drivers, safe here in the state of New Hampshire. The Room to Live program that we offer is a program that we have been taking into high schools for the past 2 years. This past year now we've been in some 25, 26 high schools, presenting the program to groups as small as 15 or 20, say a driver ed program, or to assemblies as large as 450, 500 folks, as we did over to Woodsville High School just a month or so ago. The Room to Live program is a program designed to encourage and to challenge folks to buckle up in every vehicle, every time. Just even the short trips, the long trips, the trips to the store where you think, oh, I'm just going down the block, I'll be perfectly safe. And the reason that Steve and I present this program is because we are deeply concerned about how many people are losing their lives or who are seriously injured, life-changing injuries, because they choose not to buckle up when they are in a vehicle.
Some of the items that I talk about are the safety features in the automobile and how it relates to the seatbelt. Some of our young people just feel it's a belt that they have to wear because of the police or because their parents told them. But if they understand more and more about how a car is built around the seatbelt, even though seatbelts have been around for 50-some years, the fact that they are, even today, the most important safety component of an automobile. And a lot of young people particularly, and maybe some seniors also, don't see the seatbelt as being part of the entire safety package of an automobile. So.
We are convinced that the seatbelt is just by far the most important safety design feature in any automobile, any vehicle for that matter. And we are concerned because statistics show over and over and over again that the majority of folks who do die or who are seriously injured in motor vehicle crashes are not wearing the seatbelt, or were not wearing the seatbelt at the time of the crash. For example, there's another program that I'm involved in here in the city of Littleton, in the town of Lisbon, and it's the Buckle Up in Your Pickup Truck campaign. And when we look at recent data nationwide as well as here within the state of New Hampshire, what we see is that some 70%, about 2/3 of all of the folks who are killed in crashes involving pickup trucks are not wearing the seatbelts. And unfortunately, that really translates here in the state of New Hampshire, at least, to the same kind of reality in any vehicle. The majority of folks, some 3/4 of them in recent years, who died in motor vehicle crashes here in New Hampshire were not wearing the seatbelts.
Sometimes we focus on deaths because you read about them in the paper so often, but in fact, the number of injuries is just shocking. When we're on many committees with the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire, and when they have 300, 400 traumatic brain injuries a year here in New Hampshire, you don't hear about those, you hear about the deaths. And so the very fact that so many of these crashes, the results of these crashes are preventable injuries, that's even more sad.
Yeah. Last year, the state of New Hampshire had the absolute best year that we've had in 50, and I cringe sometimes when I think about the fact that it was a good year, because 110 people died in New Hampshire last year, and 13,000+ people were injured. And many of those injuries are life-changing injuries, injuries where for the rest of your life somebody's feeding you, somebody's changing your diaper, somebody's taking care of you, or you're living in a rehab facility as opposed to in your home building your life, maximizing your life, and just making it work. All because of, well, because of the crash, but because of the choice of not being restrained in a vehicle when a crash event happens.
Much of what we, many of the talks that we do, and much what we talk about is to young people, because if we can get the habit of wearing the seatbelt early, parents are the greatest influence on their children, whether they wear the seatbelt or not. And if we can get at least one generation to see the value of that seatbelt, maybe we can change the culture that we have. So I know the Lovering Family Foundation primarily concentrates on the teen drivers. Our mission is to help reduce the number of crashes and the severity of the crashes that teenagers in New Hampshire are involved in. So many of the injuries, deaths, and issues could be prevented with more training in the use of seatbelts. Yeah.
Just in recent weeks, we've lost at least 3 teenagers here in the state of New Hampshire. And one crash I think of about a month ago that happened just outside of Keene was 2 young men, I believe one was 16, one was 17, and the passenger was not restrained, even though for folks 17 and under the age of 18, by law, they have to be restrained. Many continue to choose not to. And that's part of the reason that we push the educational piece, because of just the heartaches and the tragedies that happen. This young man, the crash that happened outside of Keene, the young man was ejected. He was the passenger, and his friend tried desperately to get the vehicle up off of his dying friend, trying to keep him alive while he was waiting for the rescue folks to show up. And when I think about the reality of that for this young man who was driving, and assuming, I'm sure, that the crash was never going to happen, and yet the crash did happen, his friend is ejected, his friend is dying, and he's left to deal with the reality that that he just would never have anticipated before that very moment.
Nobody ever believes it's going to happen to them. You know, it happens to other people, but, and when it does happen, it happens so quick that no one ever thinks it's going to happen to them. And so,
Steve and I are both involved in teaching different courses. I teach a defensive driving attitude course, a course that's designed to cause people to think about why they make the choices that they do when they're behind the wheel. And Steve will continue to talk throughout our program about the hands-on class that he offers through the Lovering Foundation.
Yeah.
But the reality is we both continuously see folks over and over and over again who are absolutely convinced that they will never be involved in a crash, they will never cause a crash, that it just won't ever happen to them. And that's part of the real reason that we want to do what we do, because the fact is it can happen to anyone at any time.
Yeah, when we're not speaking at high schools, we're in front of you're in front of many people for your course, and Lovering Family Foundation sponsors a hands-on course. One of them is called Skid School, the other is called In Control, and they are hands-on courses typically for young people who have their license. They're right at that point where they think they know all there is to driving because they've had their license for a couple months. It's the most dangerous time of their life, and we know it's the most dangerous time because that's the highest crash rate they have. That 16-year-old to 17-year-old, they'll never be more dangerous than that. We feel that a lot of these crashes are because they're undertrained, and that's no fault of driver's ed. In the culture we're in, we spend 2,000, 3,000 hours of practicing how to play baseball and basketball, and we spend 30 hours trying to make a driver, 10 hours with the driver's ed instructor, now 40 hours with the parents, and we expect varsity quality drivers. So we feel that more training, more education, the answer to many problems, more education, will help improve their reduction in crash rates. So.
When we present the Room to Live program at the high schools, the very first thing we do is we share a picture with the students, and it's a picture of a face in a windshield, a crash that happened some years ago in New Jersey. A young 22-year-old woman who was severely injured in that crash. And we share it with the kids, knowing very well that in today's world with Photoshop and other computer photo software packages, that you can take and distort any picture and make it what you want. And we assume that that's what some of them are instantly going to think, that we did this, we made this photo in order to drive the point home. And then we really encourage them to listen to the fact that this is a real crash, a real picture from a real crash, and that the young woman who was so severely injured, her life is just not what it could be, should be kind of stuff. And then I show a video from DriveCam, the website drivecam.com, and in this video what you see is it's a real crash that we're showing, and you see the driver fall asleep and his vehicle rolls over, and it rolls over so quickly you don't even see it, you don't realize that it's happening. But in about 9.5 seconds flat, the driver goes from the front driver's seat to the back seats and he goes head first out the side passenger window. And usually at that point, we've got the attention of any audience, but especially the younger audience, because their lack of experience does tell them that indeed this just isn't possible. And the fact is, it's very possible it'll happen over and over and over again. It's a predictable kind of outcome for that matter. And then from there, Steve takes some time and talks about safety design features of the modern day vehicle.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition, because then I just start talking about seatbelts, but I don't mention seatbelts first. I start talking about seatbelts have been around for 50 years, but we have to start with tires, and the new generation of tires are much stickier, and the brakes that we have now are so much more superior to what we've ever had before. Then I move into the energy management of it, and I start making the students think about what the seatbelt is really for. And it's about managing energy, the energy that you're going to have to manage when you impact something. And so kids usually haven't thought about exactly what that does and how it works. So we talk about the 3 crashes that occur. Car to tree, your body to the belt, or to the dashboard or the windshield if you're not wearing a belt. And then the third one is the one that kills you, and it might sound gross, but it's your organs to your skeleton, which is what is the ultimate cause of death. So managing the energy and reducing the pressure on the body and the energy that's being absorbed by the body is how we save lives. Then we talk about the structure of the car, and how they're built. All cars now are built softer on the front and progressively harder as you get closer to the roll cage part. And that adds some new elements of danger, because now the hardest part of the car is closest to your head. The roll cage around the windshield, the pillar right near your head. Again, the young people stop to think, oh yeah, that's right, it is there. Then we talk about airbags. We talk about the pre-tensioners on the seat belts, how they cinch up. The first explosion in a car is the pre-tensioner, and most cars have them in the front 2 seats. Some of the better cars have them in every seat position. But it starts to get the gears moving in the direction like, oh yeah, everything's connected. The softness of the front end, the tires, the brakes, the pre-tensioners, and then the airbags coming out as rapidly as they come out in less than a blink of an eye. We frequently hear the comments that, you know, seatbelts aren't that important. I've got airbags. Well, not so true. The airbags will work best if you're belted in the place that the car manufacturers expect you to be. And if you're, like the video we show at the beginning, if you're flying through the air going out the back window, an airbag in front of you is doing no good at all. So.
And when we think about airbags, SRS all over the panels in our vehicle. SRS meaning supplemental restraint system, and we
not
try,
primary.
Nothing primary about them. And Steve works hard to drive that reality home, that the airbag is only beneficial to you if indeed you are restrained, and that if you are not, the airbag actually can cause you harm. And I think one of the things that the kids react to, well, actually anybody reacts to more than anything, is, Steve, when you talk about the idea of if your hands aren't in the right position on the steering wheel and that airbag opens at 200 miles, 180 miles an hour, and all of a sudden that fist comes back.
Well, the people have a lot of technology in their cars, and they forget about what that technology can do on a negative side. An airbag does come out at 200 miles an hour, and many of us, especially us older folks, gotten accustomed to putting that hand at the top of the wheel, which is the most dangerous position. It really is awful to have a crash, but it really stinks to punch yourself in the mouth at 200 miles an hour, and that's what happens fist to face, and it's a frequent injury in an airbag related crash. And so, and you don't have time to move your hands. So That's why the new generation is being taught 9 and 3, something the older generation just never was taught.
Mhm.
So we have to think about the technology in the car that's there to help us survive a crash. But there's also some downsides, for every good. So being buckled up makes a huge difference on how the whole car interacts with you.
Yeah. And as Steve finishes his conversation around the PowerPoint program that we use, the hope is, of course, at that point that they fully understand why it's important to buckle up. Because we think that the why is because if we're in a crash, it might save our lives or it might reduce the injuries, probably will. But that's what we think, when the reality is it goes much deeper than that.
We try to, I also remind them that we've now taken the excuse away from them that they didn't know. Well, they know now, and now so much of their life is about making smart choices. And now they have to make a choice, knowing everything they know about how it's all interconnected. Now they have to make a choice: do I put it on or don't I put it on? And it's all those choices that make a difference in all of our lives. So,
yeah. We both of us work with another man by the name of Jim Esden. Jim is a fellow employee at the Injury Prevention Center at Dartmouth, but he's also a part-time police officer in the town of Charlestown. And he called me 2 days ago to tell me that on Saturday, while working his 8-hour shift, there were 4 crashes in his tiny little town of Charlestown alone. And the first crash that he went to was a rollover. And as he approached it, he was just convinced that it were serious injury or death. And as it turned out, the young man who was involved in that crash had pushed out the back window and got out of the vehicle while he was waiting for the rescue folks to come, and had minor injuries, and the only reason was because he had been wearing his belt. And of course that's what we always hope for, when the reality is so often it's just the opposite way. And you can walk away for some pretty nasty crashes where the vehicle is absolutely totaled. And I think one of the things that Steve shares with the kids that really seems to get the point home is, Steve, when you say to them, if you total the car, you can go home and you're belted so you survive and have no injuries, you can go home and say, gee, Dad, I just totaled the family car. But
can I have another?
Can I have
but at least they're there asking you for that.
So. But I'm alive because I made the choice of wearing the seatbelt.
And all car companies today are making safer cars, and the reality of it all is if we take advantage of what's in the car, we're paying for all that technology, the billions of dollars spent on safety, and the billions of dollars they use on highway safety. If we utilize it by just simply putting the belt on, it's almost the only thing that we're asked to do, that and not be distracted and pay attention to our driving, but it's the only physical thing we have to put that belt on, and it makes a huge difference in the way an automobile, any brand, functions in a crash. So.
And after Steve's presentation, I show a video called Room to Live. And this video is all about what Steve has talked about in his PowerPoint presentation, showing that because of the safety design features of our vehicles, if we stay in place within the passenger compartment, there is indeed room to walk away from so many serious crashes. And there's a reporter from Fox News in the Minneapolis area who over a period of months got into vehicles that people were killed in or were in when crashes happened that took their lives. And what she shows is if those individuals had been restrained, had been inside the passenger compartments of those vehicles, everything from a Hummer to a pickup truck to the small Honda Civic, that odds are that individual would have survived. But because they were not restrained, they were ejected out of the vehicle or thrown around within the vehicle and therefore were killed. And part of this, the power of this video, is also the segments where the parents are interviewed and the parents are talking about the loss of their children because they had chosen not to be restrained. And one that really just continuously gets to me is the dad who says that he dreamt about walking his daughter down the aisle to be married, but never thought about walking his daughter down the aisle in her casket. And
it has a ripple effect that goes through communities, schools, communities, towns, and beyond. Unfortunately, that's the time it gets the most attention. And we're trying to do something about it because we tend to forget fairly quickly about some of the bad crashes over the years. So hopefully we can make that happen.
And as much as we forget about these crashes that have happened, the reality is they happen over and over and over again. It just amazes me how often on Saturdays when I teach the defensive driving attitude course, I go home and I'll go onto the website and I'll look at WMUR News, or I'll look at the Union Leader, the media that's local to where I live outside of Concord, and so often there's another fatal crash that's happened even while I've been in the classroom. And Steve, you're out at that same time doing your hands-on course with the Lovering Foundation, and yet somebody else, because of choices they're making. And one of the big heartaches is the reality that 90 to 94% of all crashes do not have to happen to begin with. They're the results of our choices. We call them all accidents, because even when we're not making good choices behind the wheel, we don't intend for a crash to happen. But if we stop to take time to think about the reality of what we're doing over and over and over again, those things cause the crashes. And 90 to 94%. And that translates immediately into the fact that 90% of the people who are injured, 90% of the people who are killed wouldn't have to be experiencing injury or wouldn't have to be dead if only the choices had been made to start with that would have caused that crash not to happen.
And there's a lot of elements that play into that, not just the seat belts, but distracted driving. We're dealing more and more with that and the severity of distracted driving. And here again, the choices that people make while they're driving. No matter what age group, we can't blame this all on the kids. I think the young people have the potential of being our best drivers. They have the best vision, the best hearing, the best eyesight. They're talented. Their reflexes are great. If they were fully trained and fully engaged in the art of driving, they would be terrific. But the distractions, are a newer problem.
I'd like to talk a little further about the Buckle Up in Your Truck campaign that we're doing here in Littleton and in Lisbon. And the reality is that people driving pickup trucks have the lowest seatbelt usage rate, in part, to be honest, because mostly it's men. And men seem to think they're more invincible, that somehow they're going to survive a crash if a crash happens, or somehow they're not going to be in that crash. And yet the reality is that, again, about 2/3 of all of the people who are killed while driving pickup trucks are not belted. Pickup truck drivers and passengers, by having the lowest seatbelt usage rate of any type of vehicle, SUV, van, passenger car, therefore are more likely to be seriously injured or killed if they're in a crash, and the numbers show that they are. And what we're trying to do here in Lisbon and Littleton, we're the same campaign in Rochester and Lee, trying to convince not only pickup truck drivers, but everyone to buckle up. Again, every trip, every time, no matter how short that trip is. And we've had good success with that. We ran the campaign in Newport for the past 2 years, and we're able to get the seatbelt usage rate up from around 30% to start to in the low 60 percentile range at the end of the second year. And the surveys that we have done, we do a preliminary survey, and then we'll do another survey after the educational campaign, and then another one some months down the road. But at this point, the survey rates show about a 45 to 50% usage rate here in the Littleton, Lisbon area. And want to encourage everyone, especially in your pickup trucks, to buckle up, because 45 to 50% utilization rate is terrible.
There are states that have up to 90% seatbelt utilization. So it makes a difference. Makes a difference in the healthcare costs. Makes a difference in brain injuries, the care, the financial drain of it all. Not just the deaths. So.
And again, if you have any interest in these programs, Steve and I are available even throughout the summer months to present to driver educational classes. We know school won't be in session, but if there's a community group that would like to have us come and present to them, we would be happy to do that. I can be reached at here in New Hampshire at 848-0078 if anybody would like to talk
And your website
further
is?
about that. And the best way to get me actually is through, well, website-wise, through Dartmouth. If you go onto the Dartmouth Medical Center, Children's Hospital at Dartmouth, any of the websites related to Dartmouth, and drill down to the Injury Prevention Center, you can find out more about the programs that we're involved with. And again, this program is funded by the New Hampshire Highway Safety Agency, so if you want to contact them in Concord, they can guide you to us as well.
And if you wanted to know more about what the Levering Family Foundation is doing, it's a nonprofit here in the state of New Hampshire. You could go to saveateendriver.org. It's www.saveateendriver.org. And that you can get a lot of information there about the hands-on course we have. And we appreciate the time to have spent with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You can only cover so many fatal crashes in which grieving family members swear their loved one always wore a seatbelt before you start to wonder a couple of things. Do people actually wear seatbelts as often as they say? Or is life so cruel that the one and only time they don't wear a seatbelt is the time they roll the car? Either way, there's no undoing the fatal mistake. At first, it's eerie to climb into a car in which someone has died. But then I realized they didn't actually die here, but in the ditch or on the road. If they'd stayed here, they might not be dead at all, which is the point of all this.
This one mistake cost her life.
It's hard to imagine the grief that follows a traffic death.
We're gonna have to find a new normal. Learn how to live without her.
Getting any worse.
We mourn the loss of her, but we also mourn the loss of our dreams for her.
But when you see a car like Brianna Reimers,
it just adds to the list of things that you suffer through.
or like the one sitting in Don Rasmussen's tow lot,
We see a lot of it over the years.
and you think
Dozens of people that certainly would have lived had they had their seatbelts on.
that maybe this person didn't have to die, it's enough to make you cry.
I'm too emotional for this. When young people die, it's harder.
And he doesn't even know the people. He just tows the cars and hears the stories. Stories like this one. Richard Rains has kept his son's car.
I kept it just to prove a point.
His son Dylan and Dylan's girlfriend died when the car rolled and they were thrown.
You can't believe it. I know he was a seatbelt person. I believe she was too.
3 months ago, the Fox 9 investigators asked the Minnesota State Patrol and every county sheriff in the state to tell us when someone was killed or seriously hurt when they were thrown from their car. And this usually meant a rollover crash.
It's tumbling like a football. Football's got that end-for-end tumble.
Whenever possible, I inspected each car and climbed inside. In this crash, the car did exactly what it was designed to do. It absorbed all of the impact on the outside of the car. And here on the inside, especially in the passenger area, it's largely intact. There is room at my head, room at my sides, room all around. There was room to live if only the young girl riding here had been buckled safely in the car. What exactly does room to live mean? The way cars are designed has changed. They're built with what's called crumple zones. In any kind of crash, the front and back ends absorb the energy created by impact by compressing. In a rollover, the ends compress, the windshield often shatters, the sides of the car may bend in some, but the occupant area is supposed to hold up. Safety folks call this area the cage, and for good reason. It is remarkably strong, and if you're wearing your seatbelt, it will hold you inside.
But this is what they're gearing for, is protection of the occupants.
Fly out of that protective cage, and there's nothing between you and the ground.
They don't get dumped in a pile right there. So it says the vehicle comes back up, and they get pitched out. So they get pitched out on the high side. I have not come across a crash yet where the people would have been better off ejected.
Gouge mark?
The State Patrol was working this rollover crash just outside Mankato earlier this month.
It appears as though the occupant was ejected due to the vault or the rollover. The vehicle then appeared to have landed on the roadway on top of the driver.
In this car, too, there is room to live, if only the driver had stayed in the car. That was true in every rollover crash we investigated, every single one. This Hummer didn't hold up well in a high-speed rollover. Front and back ends literally sheared off, but just look at the cage that could have protected the driver. For the driver who was not wearing a seatbelt, there may well have been room to live. How about this pickup? No seatbelt for the driver. He flew out the window. Look at all of this room around me. The cab of this pickup is largely intact. This is room to live. In Faribault, we come to see one car, but the owner of Glenn's Towing, Don Rasmussen, has got more for us than that, like a lot of experience.
I've been here for 40-some years, so I've seen a lot of accidents.
The wisdom that comes with that.
A lot of times friends will come and look at the car, you know, and say, man, I told her she's supposed to wear a seatbelt.
And not one, but two cars to show us. This is the first. A young mother died when the car rolled and she was pitched out. But look, if she'd stayed inside, she probably wouldn't even have bumped her head. There's room to live. It is a short walk to the second car.
Same type of situation, except that it was a straightaway road, but he lost control. Went in the ditch, flipped her over a couple times, I'd say.
The damage to the two cars is nearly identical. Inside, there is plenty of room to live. And guess what? This driver did. Why? He was wearing a seatbelt.
I saw no injuries at all. You know, he was walking around out there.
And the contrast between these two crashes says it all.
This one here was just a few days ago.
So when you look at this and you look at that, what do you think?
If only. If only. It, you know, buckle up.
If only. Two of the most painful words a family can utter. Buckle up. Two of the most powerful. Brianna Reamer's family has said them all.
We always taught her, wear your seatbelt.
This is what the inside of Brianna's car looks like. If she had stayed seatbelted inside, she probably would have bumped her head, but there is plenty of room to live. Instead, she was thrown partway out the back window, and the car landed on top of her.
One time, it all takes, you know. I tell the kids that you let your guard down one time, and the messenger of misery will jump right on your back.
Only the misery is not your own.
Someday I wanted to walk her down the aisle when she was getting married, not walk her down the aisle in a casket.
If only there is room to live. She had buckled up. There's room to live. If only room to live. Any of them had. There's definitely room to live. Room to live. Room to live. I've often said that if people saw what I've seen, they'd wear a seatbelt every time. Now you've seen it.